Welcome to another episode of the History of Yu-Gi-Oh! And before I get the 50th comment about this, yes everyone, I'm aware that Simo made his own The History of Yu-Gi-Oh! Series months after I started mine. And while that series is totally different than mine, I had many comments from many of you saying that the thumbnails look strikingly similar, with the Yu-Gi-Oh! Images on the right side and the History of Yu-Gi-Oh! Title on the left side. Here's the thing. Although there are similarities, I highly doubt it was intentional, or that he even knows about this series and that I exist, okay? This series is not that popular, and the episode 1 has maybe 5,000 views in total, so I really doubt that a much more popular YouTuber would even know about this channel. Just wanted to clear that up because I was getting a lot of comments about that, oh my gosh, look at that, relax everyone, relax, it's fine, it's cool. So anyway, we last left off during a period where the threat of synchro dominance was growing slowly but surely, due to great archetypes and tuners of course. Also, the next 2 years would continue to be ruled by synchros. The methods and strategies used to achieve heavy synchro summoning would constantly change. This period in Yu-Gi-Oh's history is when the nature of the game began to change, in that the meta would overwhelmingly be ruled by archetypes. It's sad to say, but from this point on, it's incredibly rare that a non-archetype deck would perform very well competitively. Old school Yu-Gi-Oh! Was truly behind us now, and these next few years are what set the foundation for modern Yu-Gi-Oh! Through an increase in archetypes, hand traps, negates, and the game speeding up tremendously. Sit back and watch history unfold. The start of 2010 simply continued from last year's final format, so it's easy to tell which decks were still dominating early this year. There were a few sets and products that released a couple new key cards however. For example, Brionac Dragon of the Ice Barrier was released through the Dual Terminal. The iconic factor of this card has to do with how uniquely powerful its effect was in combination with it being a generic 6, which means that it would commonly compete with Goyo Guardian for that spot. Brionac has what you call a mass non-destruction removal effect. This type of removal was so unheard of that the card had a huge legacy behind it. You see, mass removal at this point was almost exclusively related to destruction, with cards like Dark Hole and Raigeki, and even the 3 big boss monsters mentioned in the last video, Gizaru's Dark Arm Dragon and Judgment Dragon, were all mass destruction effects. Brionac was very distinct in that it had mass bouncing removal, which wasn't the first card ever to do this, but older cards that had this effect were just too plain slow or situational to have any competitive viability. Brionac eventually received an errata due to other reasons having to do with abusing self-bouncing your own cards, which is why it received a hard once per turn and limited the bouncing to only the opponent's card. But even if this card was initially released with its errata in 2010, it would have still been very good at the time because it could still mass bounce opponents' cards. The other significant early 2010 release was from the Machina Mayhem structure deck. Prior to this, structure decks typically had the occasional good card here and there to help players with the budget a little bit, but the release of fantastic boss monsters in structure decks was quite unheard of. For example, if you wanted a Dark Arm Dragon, you only had 2 choices. Either buy a bunch of Phantom Darkness packs and hope you get lucky, or buy it as a single, which wasn't going to cost you only a couple bucks, there's no way. Either option is not good for your budget unless you're one of those naturally gifted people that can pull exactly what you need from the first pack all the time. Come on, we all know someone who has that power somehow, it's ridiculous. But anyway, Machina Mayhem offered the amazing boss monster, Machina Fortress, as well as 39 other cards, for the very low price of only about $10 US. This made it one of Yu-Gi-Oh's first truly competitive budget decks, as it wasn't that difficult to get all the pieces you needed to construct this deck. Fortress had a very useful summoning condition where you could discard machine monsters to bring it from the hand or graveyard, and it also had great effects when destroyed by battle or targeted by a monster effect. Overall, very flexible card with good overall stats in combination of being affordable made it a great card and deck in general. The March 2010 ban list had some major hits. Chaos Sorcerer, Charge of the Light Brigade, Lumina, Burial from a Different Dimension, Mizuki, Foolish Burial, and Allure of Darkness were all now limited, while Black Whirlwind received a semi-limit. All these cards weaken Lightsworns, Twilights, Zombies, and Blackwings in different ways, and this is the ban list that brought the game to what is referred to as Edison format, named after the Shonen Jump Championship Edison, which is also the last Shonen Jump Championship ever. Edison format had a wide variety of decks used. In addition to the now nerfed Lightsworns, Twilight, Synchro Cat, and Blackwings, Machina gadgets were very popular in this format, and Gladiator Beasts made a return thanks to Elemental Hero Prisma, which made fusion summoning their bosses easier. The two new decks in this format, however, were Quick Draw Dandy Warrior and Flame Veil Synchro. Quick Draw Dandy Warrior utilized Quick Draw Synchron, which was a very flexible and versatile card for making synchros that required synchrons as material, such as Drill Warrior. While Flame Veil Synchro relied on Flame Veil Fire Dock to special summon additional monsters, and Flame Veil Magician was used as their main synchro. Yes, Flame Veil Magician's effect is complete trash, absolute garbage, but it still saw some use during this time. And it just shows you how rare level 4 tuners were during this time. But the ability to synchro summon cards like Stardust Dragon using only 2 materials was a huge advantage the deck had, as almost every other deck needed at least 3. The release of the Shining Darkness in May 2010 saw the end of Edison format due to some releases for other archetypes, being X-Sabers and Infernities. Both archetypes had already been out for a while, but it wasn't until the set where they got the support they needed. Infernities focus on effects to reduce your hand to nothing while utilizing powerful effects on cards whose only real condition was to have no cards in the hand. I know it may seem confusing on how one can win a duel with no cards in the hand, but keep in mind that these effects were truly powerful to the point where it offset the whole having no cards thing. X-Sabers on the other hand has some newly released X-Sabers known as Double X-Sabers. Specifically, cards like Double X-Saber Faltro were super efficient in storming the field, and then creating a bunch of high-powered synchros due to its special summoning effects. Also, Double X-Saber Golems was a fantastic hand destruction card because it was not limited to once per turn, and made it extremely challenging for your opponent to recover from. May 2010 was also a major milestone in Yu-Gi-Oh's history because it marked the beginning of the Yu-Gi-Oh! Championship Series, also known as YCS. The previous Shonen Jump Championships, SJC, were now officially retired, and YCS took their place. The first YCS winner ever used a Machina gadget deck, but it was also cluttered with X-Sabers, Infernities, and many more as well. One more thing about Shining Darkness is that it also released the last few Frog support cards to make a reliable Frog Monarch deck, which used cards like Swap Frog, Substitute, and Ronin Totem in combination with Ryza, Caius, and Light and Darkness Dragon. The deck was pretty good, but the more infamous Frog deck was obviously Beelze Frog Beatdown. Just kidding, it was actually Frog FTK. Frog FTK is one of Yu-Gi-Oh's most infamous decks in history, because it was so simple and cheap, but it won the 2010 World Championship. Yes, it did. The breakdown is very basic. All you need is Substitute, Ronin Totem, and Mass Driver. Substitute could literally dump every single frog monster in your deck to the graveyard in one single turn. Ronin Totem could then special summon itself in the graveyard by banishing one of those frogs, and Mass Driver would tribute the Ronin Totem. Neither of these 3 cards had once per turn clauses on them, and because of that, FTKs were very easily possible, especially when used in combination with great support cards like 1-for-1. The next set, Duelist Revolution, was also quite noteworthy because of 2 key cards it released, Solemn Warning and Effect Veiler. This time period was the beginning of another era in Yu-Gi-Oh! In regards to negates, as Fiendish Chain was fairly new and now these 2 came out. Solemn Warning was great at countering the popular synchros or special summon spammers, while the other 2 block off powerful boss monster effects. In addition, Gores, the Emissary of Darkness, and Tragodia were newly released, and these 2 cards alongside Effect Veiler and last year's Honest paved the way for a completely new terminology created by the Yu-Gi-Oh! Community, hand traps. Obviously we have a lot more hand traps in the modern day, but these here are a great example of just how far we've come from the game's first one, Kuriboh. The September 2010 ban list targeted Frog FTK obviously, by forbidding Substitute and Mass Driver, but it also limited Infernity Launcher and Black Whirlwind while also forbidding Rescue Cat. This, in combination with Starstrike Blast release, created an opportunity for an early version of a deck that would eventually dominate for months, Plant Synchro. The release of 2 fantastic plant tuners, Glow-a-Bulb and Spore, would set the foundation for the deck, as well as previously thought to be average cards such as Lonefire Blossom and Dandelion, which gave them so much flexibility. There weren't any major format changes until February, however, with the release of Storm of Ragnarok. Remember those 6 samurais I briefly mentioned in the last video? Well, they're back, but better than ever because of legendary 6 samurai Shien, and better monsters that could special summon themselves easier, which could easily abuse a card that honestly wasn't that great before this, Gateway of the Six. This was a great example of a card that went from mediocre to downright busted overnight. And you would commonly see cards like Naturia Beast and Barkion in this deck to couple well with Shien. You know those annoying decks nowadays that have like 5 million negates turn 1? Well, this kind of stuff happened back then too because all these cards basically prevented the opponent from playing Yu-Gi-Oh! However, the March 2011 ban list limited Gateway of the Six and also Dandelion for planned synchros, and the coming months saw the rise of Gemini Hero. The release of Elemental Hero The Shining allowed for Miracle Fusion to be used much more effectively. The deck strategy involved using Gemini Spark to tribute Neo's Alias, a Gemini monster, and then using Neo's Alias to make The Shining through Miracle Fusion. Then The Shining could recycle those banished monsters eventually back into your hand. The deck was also notable for being one of the first ever to use Super Polymerization competitively. It was dangerous because Elemental Heroes now had a generic fusion monster for literally every single attribute except Divine of course, which meant that none of your opponent's monsters were truly safe from Super Poly. However, the final deck of this format and also the true king of the format was Tengu Plants. Just by looking at this card, Reborn Tengu, it's so easy to see how it can easily be abused. The card used a previous engine of Plant Synchro, as well as new draw power synchro such as Formula Synchron and TG Hyper Librarian to gain quick advantage. Also, the release of Trishula, Dragon of the Ice Barrier only further helped it as well, as this is one of the best synchros in the game's history, and currently limited 9 years later in the year of 2020. One deck that randomly won a YCS out of nowhere involved using the Agents, and that was because Lost Sanctuary was released during this time. Basically, the Agent of Creation Venus could bring out 3 mystical shine balls for a 1500 life point cost, and flood the field for synchro summoning. In addition, Archlord Christia was ran in this deck to create a powerful floodgate against special summoning. It honestly worked very, very well. By August of 2011, a new summoning mechanic was introduced, XYZ Summoning. Oh shoot, wait. XZ Summoning, where you would require 2 monsters of the same level on the field in order to bring out an Xyz monster of the same rank. This might come as a shocker though, but Xyz summoning was not really all that relevant for the first few months. At casual play it definitely was because they were a new hot release, but not competitively. The September 2011 ban list limited Formula Synchron, TG Hyper Librarian, Trishula, Lonefire Blossom, Shien, and Shien Smoke Signal. So the question is, what's next? Well, in the coming months, the first competitive Xyz engine deck emerged, Dino Rabbit. While synchro summoning would never truly leave the meta, this was one of the first few decks that overwhelmingly relied on Xyz monsters for the extra deck. The deck used the newly released Rescue Rabbit in combination with Sabersaurus and Cavazals to pump out monsters from the deck to make Evolzar Lagia and Evolzar Dalka, which in combination could basically negate anything. The newly released tour guide from the Underworld was also useful in this deck, and overall the deck was a huge force of power in the meta. While the nerfed Tengu plan still continued to win by the end of this year, Dino Rabbit finally won a YCS in December. This was an indication to everyone of what the meta would turn out to be starting in 2012. Basically, the dominance of Xyz decks. And this is actually a perfect way to end the video, as the beginning of the true Xyz era would be the beginning of 2012, which is the next video of course. Stay tuned for the next episode where we cover the iconic Xyz era.